Hello, everybody. This is Bill McKibben, and greetings from Egypt and the annual UN conference on the climate. Uh, it's a difficult uh, conference, as it always is over here, as we try to come to terms with this gravest of all issues. And in this case, try to come to terms with the fact that the conference is taking place in a police state. I've been doing truthfully, much of the work I've been doing in preparation for this week or two is trying to figure out how to help free some of the political prisoners held here in Egypt. It makes a mockery of the idea that we're having a climate conference filled with activists, just the kind of people like me who, if we were Egyptian, would be behind bars. So it's been an interesting and difficult lead up into these negotiations. I'm very glad to get to join you to talk about peace in a not very peaceful year. And the angle I want to take is to talk about the role that fossil fuel plays in all of that. As you know, fossil fuel is driving the climate crisis, which is the biggest existential risk we've ever faced, and also one of the greatest threats to stability and order and calm on this planet. The UN estimates that we could see 1 billion climate refugees this century. If we see anything like that, obviously it'll be a century marked by the worst kinds of bloodshed and crisis. So we have to slow it down. Fossil fuel also kills 9 million people a year directly. We breathe the combustion byproducts of fossil fuel, those particulates that lodge in lungs. 9 million is one death in 5 on this planet. Avertible because the vaccine for those deaths and for the climate crisis is called solar panels and wind turbines and electric heat pumps and electric vehicles and bicycles and buses. We have a hard time building those things at the speed that we otherwise could, not because they're uneconomic. The cheapest way to generate power on our planet now is to point a sheet of glass at the sun, but because there are people with an extraordinary interest in keeping us hooked to coal and gas and oil. And those are people who control or own oil wells and gas wells and coal mines. And this year we've been reminded most powerfully of their effect on the planet by Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, his brutal invasion of a country reminiscent of the land wars of the 20th century. Although in this case, he's not even trying to fight other soldiers. They're just targeting civilians over and over and over again. And the shame of that is that he couldn't do it were it not for his control of oil and gas. 60% of Russia's export earnings come from oil and gas. Look around your house and try to find something made in Russia that you could boycott to show your disgust at their inhumanity. And I would wager you can't, unless you have an old bottle of Stolichnaya in the back of the liquor cabinet. I'm guessing you're not going to find anything because they're just a gas station for the world. And they use that control over oil and gas to intimidate, to bully the countries of Western Europe, to keep them from standing up to them. So it's been instructive to be reminded, as my friend Svetlana Romanko, longtime colleague at 350 and then the leader in the Laudato Si movement, Pope Francis's movement to counter climate change, but a Ukrainian who's taken this year off from that work to stand up for her country, and whom I've been on one Zoom or webinar after another with, often with the sound of bombs falling in the background, her air raid sirens going off. As she reminds us, fossil fuel doesn't just wreck the climate, fossil fuel underwrites fascism. And that's true whether it's in Russia or in Saudi Arabia or with the Koch brothers, our biggest oil and gas barons, and also the people who did the most to degrade our democracy. So one way to move towards peace is to get ourselves off the fuels that foment war and fascism. One of the beautiful things about solar panels or wind turbines is that Vladimir Putin can't turn off the sun, and the King of Saudi Arabia can't interdict the wind, and the Koch brothers have no control over the clean energy. It is the birthright of all of us, and that we need to build out with extraordinary speed now in order to have some hope of heading off, well, to just most tragic events in human history. Our effort at Third Act this year, in connection with the barbarity of the Russian invasion, has been what we've called heat pumps for peace and freedom, trying to convince the Biden administration to put aside money in order to export technology like heat pumps to Europe to help people keep the heat on this winter without burning Putin's oil and gas, so that they can boycott that gas and try and bankrupt his regime and still stay warm. And we've had some success. I first proposed it the day after the invasion began, and within 90 days, the Biden administration had signed off on it, using the Defense Production Act to underwrite the production of heat pumps. And they've just recently put out a bid for tender of, I think, $250 million in this regard. So that's a very good sign and a very good start. And just the kind of thing we could and should be providing, helping all we can, not only Europe, but also the less developed world, Africa and Asia and South America, to quickly move into this world of renewable energy. Because that's what peace looks like in 2022. A world that's not subject to the brutal whims of dictators like Putin, empowered by their control over vital resources. We can't take all his power away, unfortunately. He continues to try and use food as a weapon, for instance. But we can take this one away. We can make sure that energy is not a weapon that he or anybody else can use in an effort to sow division and chaos. So heat pumps for peace and freedom, that's what we've been saying at Third Act, where we're bringing together people over the age of 60, many of us with deep roots in things like the anti-war movement of the 1960s and 70s, in order to try and stand up to the violent conflicts of the day in which we live. Thank you for all of that. And please, please, please keep in your hearts a real prayer. I mean, I'm no minister. I'm just a Methodist Sunday school teacher. But keep in your heart some kind of prayer for the good people of Ukraine, subject to things that, on a scale that we haven't seen in a long time in the West. We allowed this to develop over time, in part with our own appetite for energy that drives up the world price of oil and enriches people like Putin, and it's time for all of us to play our role in bringing it to an end. Thank you.